So this is a QR code for the Etherpad. So I'm hoping that as I'm talking and leading discussion, if folks don't mind just jotting down any notes there, that's good. Otherwise, we don't need everything, but just taking some large swaths. So I guess as a first question, I'd really like to lead this as a discussion, learn from you, hear from you about what you would like to see in a handbook, what your experiences are in working with these kind of organizations. Just really I want this to be as collaborative as possible. So who's worked with any kind of mentorship, whether that's open or not, in your careers, either as a mentee or a mentor? Cool. So most people. How many of those have been within free software? Okay, about half of people. And then how many of you have participated as mentors? Most people. Nice. Great. Maybe just to kick things off, we could just do a quick round of introductions if people want, just because I really like to facilitate this and not have me being prescriptive and tell you all the things that I think I know about this kind of topic. So yeah, I'm Pono. I work at Conservancy and Outreachy, and maybe we'll just go back if people don't feel like you have to introduce yourself.
I'm Kevin Finzi. I actually am employed by Red Hat. I work on Fedora full time, so I do a lot of mentoring of new people coming into our infrastructure from the community or wherever. So yeah, I'm very interested in this.
I'm Stacey Giesler. I work at PG Experts in Alameda, California. I am the president of the United States PostgreSQL Association, and in that role, one of my principal jobs is being the board representative for the Diversity Committee, and one of the things the committee is looking at is getting a mentorship program going for us.
My name is Rhea Farrell-Shelmont. I am the program manager for the Open Program Office at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. I do mentorship through both my company as well as externally. One of the things I'm particularly interested in is seeing law schools and undergrads coordinate open source initiatives, because the lawyers need to understand this stuff too.
Yeah.
I'm Savvy. I'm a free and open source software advocate for my passion work, and also volunteer kind of professionally. And then for normie work, I suppose, as much as you could call it that, I do programmatic outreach in an unofficial capacity with the Invisible Internet Project. I'm mentorship angle, looking for, just trying to see where everybody's at. I think it's important to make sure that in the free and open community that the type of outreach that we're doing and the type of onboarding that we're doing and things like that for just, industry wide is in line with human rights and making sure that people have health insurance, stuff like that,
I work for an education technology company in software engineer, and I'm a member of the Bike Alliance. I was very involved in the WebAssembly community for several years as an open source contributor and instructor and organizer of groups.
Hi, my name is Mark Davis. I'm the executive director at Open Eugene. We're community connectors in Eugene, Oregon. I'm also a Mozilla open leader, and we do events around open source stuff and create open source projects for nonprofits in the community and try to line up cognitive surplus or people who want to volunteer on projects to projects that need that help.
I'm Edward. I currently work in Expo, and I'm primarily a software engineer, but I'm also doing some informal outreach as well. Primarily through talks, but I'm considering adding mentorship to my toolbox.
There was this introductions. Paul, Curtis.
I'm David, and I work at N10. I'm a fellow in the Open Source Fellowship, and we're currently in the process of being mentored to participate in open source and community technology projects. And then personally, I also participated in the design week for queer people of color, and so I'm very passionate about mentoring or creating spaces for underrepresented populations and to tech or non-traditional backgrounds.
I'm Violet, and I'm also part of the Underground Foundation, so I will go there.
I'm Lance Levinson. I'm the director of the Open Source Lab at Oregon State University. We had hired postgraduate students to manage all the systems, and I hope to them, learn how to do DevOps.
I'm Steve Funk. I'm a senior PhD student at Oregon State University. My research focusing on improving the collaboration for open source, and the majority of my work is focusing on the mentorship in open source. I published a series of publications about the mentorship, including what's the best quality of the mentorship in open source, how to improve the mentorship in open source, strategy for mentors, strategy for mentees, what's the ideal mentorship, mentee thing for open source projects, and also some informal mentorship. Yeah.
I'm Lorenzo. I'm a software engineer at Microsoft. Just trying to get re-involved in open source work in general.
I'm Michael Halstead. I work as an infrastructure community development project at Linux Foundation, and I worked with Outreachy for people on continuous integration and Victoria deployments.
I'm Darius Kazemi. I live here in town. I work at the Applied Social Media Lab at Harvard Law School, and I maintain a bunch of open source projects, and I wouldn't be where I am if I didn't have like very strong mentorship in my own past from coworkers at places where I had worked, and I want to like give that back to people as well.
Yes.
I'm Derek. I was a Linux kernel exec maintainer, so the most I can say is I have seen what happens when we screw up.
Hi, I'm Neil. I do a bunch of stuff in various open source projects, Fedora, KDE, OpenSUSE, other places. I'm kind of here because I just want to see what people are thinking about when it comes to open source mentorship. Because in my own starting point was bereft of mentorship, and it was very, very hard. And if I wasn't a persistent fool, I don't think I would have made it this far. But people shouldn't suffer to get a good experience out of being part of free software communities. I'm Alia. I work on Zul, which is an organizing cat, is by Outreachy. My responsibilities include community management and managerial mentorship programs. So, for example, right now we have 14 folks doing the Google Summer Code program with us, and I'm making sure that all runs smoothly.
Hi, my name is Devi Bohancha. I'm Director of Community at the Open Mentorship Foundation. I myself am Community Manager for 2 projects, but I have a colleague, Kendall Nelson, she leads our university partnership program. So we are working with an increasing number of universities who are trying to have open source as being part of their curriculum, and like, for example, doing a course around cloud, and then they have students contributing to OpenStack, which is an open source cloud platform. And through the program, we are, my colleague and also the community managers, we're working with the university professors as well as the communities to try to connect all the dots and people who are figuring out the courses. And the microphone, I don't think it's working.
I think maybe just for the recording.
We have, no, I have a question. So anyway, that's what we do, and I'm here to figure out what this program is about, and I will probably connect you with Kendall to take my selection from there.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Luke. I'm with I work with Revolution Linux Leader, which is a distro, and I've received a and I've received a lot of mentorship in my career at various jobs, and from the community when I first got involved in Parabola, and I'd like to pay that forward and offer good mentorship to new and junior engineers coming in.
Cool, thank you. If you don't want to be on the recording, you don't have to introduce yourself.
I'm Steven, I'm with JFP, and I'm just interested in how we continue to grow things for the future.
Great. Well, thanks so much, everyone. Yeah, so I think for a little bit more context and kind of leading, it's very like inspiring to hear how many of you have worked with either leading your own or working within your own organizations on mentorship. I think that like as one of the goals of the project is sort of like, how do we think a little bit more systematically about this? Like we've all kind of developed and gone through challenges in learning and deploying these kind of systems. So how can we think a bit more systematically about learning from each other, about like, I don't think that we need to be prescriptive about the best way to run this. That's not what the intended goal is. It's more just what are sort of the big archetypes of programs, and how do we sort of sketch out a rough shape to make it more accessible to do mentoring, to provide resources for mentees and mentors, and specifically to like get more organizations involved in that. So I've got a couple questions up on the pad. If we want to start here to discuss, I think that maybe for me a good starting point would be pros and cons of a mentorship program in your experience coming from within the organization or externally. I think that we've encountered a lot of organizations that sort of don't want to work with Outreachy for various reasons, but would rather roll their own. And so having more context as to why certain places would like that or not is one question I have. Yeah, maybe questions about longevity. What are some of the like major changes that your programs have undergone during the history of them to make them more accessible, to deal with funding crises, to get more mentors and mentees involved? Does anyone have any thoughts about such a thing? Yeah. I think if you don't mind the microphone for the recording. Thank you.
Yeah, so from our experience with Zillow, I would say, I think maybe the biggest challenge of a mentorship program was actually the work it takes to, especially when folks first start showing up and they're kind of aren't oriented yet, that onboarding process and, figuring out how to work with all these folks who are coming in without having the maintainers spending all their time doing that, right? They still need to be working on the project itself. And that's definitely been a challenge when we've participated in outreach. There's a lot of folks who might not be very far along in their development engineers yet who are coming in, so they're struggling with a lot, not just getting oriented to our project specifically, but even the foundational engineering skills that they need in order to contribute. So I guess the way our program has evolved is we've over time added more and more resources and more structure to this. So when we're reviewing code, for example, we don't immediately jump into detailed code review for somebody who's brand new. We'll give very light touch initial feedback and see if they can address that, and then kind of go deeper with them. We have tons of documentation that we've been constantly kind of iterating and developing, so that when somebody has a question, we don't have to answer that question again and again and again. We can just point into the doc. So I can go on and on, but yeah, here for other folks too.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think that overhead question of getting people up to speed so they feel good and contributing that's a real challenge, because doing that one-on-one obviously doesn't scale. I heard something from Emily Lovell at UC Santa Cruz. And one of the great things she did with her awesome HBCU mentorship program was to do it as a cohort. So all of the students decide one open source project to contribute to together, and then they all sort of work on that together. And I thought that was a clever way to sort of do the scaling. You've got one person with the project. Either they had a nice relationship with that project, so they were able to get some internal support from the project. But I think it works just with somebody who's familiar with open source of, hey, so we're all going to do this together. We're all going to see the workflow. And then that way you're not having people going in 900 directions at a time, needing that kind of supervision. Yeah. Does anybody else have any thoughts? should have thought ahead and had a race in the circle or something.
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts on this area because our mentorship is kind of informal. It isn't very structured. It's, you know, when community members come in, they say, hey, I'd like to contribute. We can say, oh, well, here's the process. We have some documentation. You can join or whatever. But we're not assigning one-on-one mentors to people because it's just the scale problem that you mentioned there is just impossible. You know, when people are really busy and working on a bunch of stuff, and say 5 new people show up, you don't have 5 mentors to assign them to, anything like that. So we kind of have the opposite thing that you were talking about, where instead of a cohort of people all working on the same project, we have a pool of people working on the project mentoring multiple people, like all the new people. You know, instead of a mentor, you have, here are these 8 people that you can talk to, or if you have questions about or whatever. And of course that gives a disconnectedness to it, right? Because you don't have the one-on-one. You don't know that you can just go talk to your mentor, and maybe some people feel bad about asking a community of people, you know, questions or things like that. So that scale problem is a real issue. And I think like Outreachy and other places avoid that by having a process for joining, like matching mentors to mentees and going through a process and so forth. But when you're talking about a community or less formal onboarding, you have that whole scale problem back and forth. So that I think would be definitely something to address. I don't know if there's a solution, but you know, maybe there's things you can do to mitigate that problem.
So kind of elaborating on what Kevin said there, or bouncing off of that rather, like from our perspective, you know, we're in a sort of similar boat with like, you know, my unofficial work, right, with the, like in the network here, we're trying to manage like anonymous communications and people who it's important to them to keep their privacy up and stuff like that. And then also you've got organizational complexity, well, not organizational complexity, but like in terms of people, but like code complexity, you know? So when you're doing your onboarding experience and you've got people who are mired in their, I like to think of it like your mental sandbox, right? Like where all your work lives. You're in an echo chamber of expert thought whenever you're in higher level dev work. And then you're trying to like onboard new people who they're experts in their own right. They're very intelligent and they have their own, you know, it's not that they can't understand what's going on, but there's a volume issue. And I think that it's important to try to break it down and make it so that your onboarding material, like for me, I think it's important that your onboarding material should be accessible to a brand new person. Like I should be able to walk up to an 8-year-old and explain the network to them, and they can come up with a way that they might want to share ideas about new toys on it, something like that. And so like, but all that comes down into chunking it down, you know, making your onboarding material digestible amounts. I don't know, who wants this next? Anybody?
I'll take it for now. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think that the overwhelmingness, that's definitely something that all mentorship problems have, right? Is that like you enter and you're around all these experts that know so much more than you. When do you speak up? When do you advocate for yourself? I often see like in free software that people recommend documentation changes as like the first things to do. I wonder if people have had success with that. Is that still best practice? Are people looking for other first changes? One, we got one no. One interesting idea I heard was people who do their first change, it's a take a penny, leave a penny. So once you make a first change, you're in a category of people that identifies a good scale of problem for a first change. So now you tag on whatever your bug tracker is, this is a good first problem to do. I thought that was a really clever way to sort of have this continuity and this lineage of people that are coming in and doing changes. But I think it's sort of an open problem of what are the good ways to get people in for projects.
Just on
On documentation as like an entry point, I mean, I think it really, there's no one size fits all for people. You're going to have some people who are going to feel like, you know, they really want to contribute code. And I think for an early contributor especially, it's important to like chase what makes them feel like really productive and and so, you know, otherwise you'll get people bouncing off really hard. Obviously, if the person is interested in documentation, I think documentation is a great first. Or if they're like neutral and they just want to like get a sense of the workflow and so forth, it can be good too. But yeah, I don't think you should tell someone who really wants to contribute some code that they should hold their horses, you know, and do some documentation stuff. So that's.
Something that I've found success in the projects that I maintain run is, in addition to having things that are tagged as like easy fixes or good first issues or whatever, making it possible for them to talk to you as they're working through a problem is incredibly helpful, especially for people who are completely unfamiliar with the problem space or are just excited about it. There's lots of people that have energy and enthusiasm with no knowledge. And there are some folks who think of this as something that is not good, and they will kind of shoot them down. My opinion is that if you have people like this, it's better to try to see if you can build them up to understand what they're trying to tackle, and see if they're still willing to engage and keep going with it. At the end of the day, even if they wind up not contributing to fix that particular problem or whatever, they'll wind up feeling appreciative and engage maybe in other aspects or be part of the project or even be an advocate for it, which is always valuable because the biggest problem any open source project has, or any free software project it has, is advocacy. Like getting people to just know that it exists and to bring them out and get more people enthusiastic about it.
Jumping back a couple of points up on either path. One of the things that I've found more successful in helping out mentees is to try to work with them intensively about setting up the automated CI system for XFS, because I can frame this as if you have questions or doubts about what you're seeing in the source code, here's a convenient way to quietly go try making a change. Just, you know, maybe you feel like you have an informed opinion about something that could change, or maybe you just want to do random things and see what happens. But regardless, this gets rid of the feeling of, oh, I don't know what I'm doing and I don't even know how to find out. Well, I'll help you set up the CI system so at least you can go find out whether or not this is what you're understanding things correctly. Because you can, you know, people can form hypotheses about, I think this is how this code works. If I change it to do this, then I should get this other weird result. Right? See if the testing system actually yields that. And if nothing else, this also helps us find gaps in CI testing, and also, you know, comes with the interesting cultural exchange when they say, inevitably someone says, are you guys actually okay with the 55% pass rate? And then you have to go figure out, okay, what did we screw up?
Don't have experience with mentoring myself, but I do have experience with running like a how to contribute to this project training, which did include the thing of setting up a development environment and putting together the first patch and pushing it up for review. And it was interesting to me to see a relatively big chunk of people not really being familiar with Git, not really being familiar with Garrett, and that's a lot of time that goes into teaching those tools. So having at least a baseline list of expectations and criterions you want to do this, you need to be familiar with the basics of tool X, Y, Z. So that would not be the trainer's responsibility to teach that, the mentor's responsibility to teach that, because again, it's a lot of time. And those tools are available. I think almost like most communities use tools that are available for people to figure out prior to doing the training, the mentorship, those things. So I think that that is something that is worthwhile to make sure that it's highlighted, and that helps to some extent. And then when it comes to the first contribution type of things, I think that's also specific to a person. I just talked to someone today who was mentioning that sometimes it keeps people back that they don't want to mess something up. Like they're not familiar with it and they're to the level of like, oh, if I push something and it's not working well, then I messed it up. And they don't realize that on one hand that didn't mess anything up because it's not in the main code base yet. And even if it makes it in, it's so easy to take out because that's why we have version control. But many people who don't have a large extent of experience, they just don't know and they're scared. So maybe sometimes have like a, I don't know, sandbox repo where people can deliberately mess things up and teach them how to fix it. That might make it easier to have them a little less intimidated when they go to the real project and the real people and trying to do something, and then they learn that, oh, failure is not an issue because I know how to fix it, or I know how to figure out how to fix it. So these kind of little things can go a long way in terms of getting people taking steps and maybe making mentor's lives a little easier. I also have a little question in terms of the scope of the mentorship that we're talking about. I missed the very beginning of the session, I'm sorry. Are we talking about onboarding new people, or are we also talking about like mentoring people, for example, in a maintainer role or a project leadership role, just because of all the talks about maintainer shortage and burnout? And it's another challenge that I'm trying to figure out with communities how to do, because that's a very similar activity in terms of mentoring someone into something that they haven't done before. So I was wondering if that is also part of the scope of what you're talking about, or we're talking about newbies and interns and students and.
Yeah, I think in general, we're looking at sort of mentorship programs at large. So we're looking at any kind of role that might take. I think that the mentorship specifically looking at maintainership is like a can of worms wholly separate, but so important that I think that that's also, there's a lot of room for opening that up. I know that that's historically not been something that's been sort of a mentorship, like there's been any mentorship there. I know there've been a couple experiments or tries from various like companies and organizations, but like personally I would love to see that. I think that like that's something that like is very much secret, and young people I think don't have very much idea how to get into it, particularly because there is no onboarding into maintainership. So yeah, I'm curious what people have to say.
Thank you. Just one more note on the maintainership and things. I think one thing that we could consider as part of all these kind of things is also teach people to review and encourage people to review code and changes, because somehow that always ends up being on the back burner and only the maintainer's responsibility, and that's never fair.
Yeah. As just to kill 1 second. So earlier there was talk about the CI and the automation. And I think a lot of what Ildiko was talking about is sort of like, I think there is a lot of space to have sandboxing, to have automation, to make it easier. I've also heard anecdotally that like younger people really don't like to fail in public. Personally, can't relate, love it. But I think that it like really making such resources available to people is more welcoming. It's an accessibility tool. Like when we can do this, we can get more people that are very scared, whether by personality or whatever, about failing in public, especially in a new community. I can only understand that. So I think that there is a lot of opportunity to build that kind of tooling.
I just wanted to talk about how for some of the mentorship we're talking about, like mentorship of maintainers and just mentorship along the pipeline, I feel like a lot of mentorship I've received has been informal, where like it wasn't a mentorship program. I've had companies that I worked at that had a mentorship program. It was assigned a mentor. And then that person ends up not necessarily even being the person who gives me the most mentorship or who I connect with to like receive that. And then I go to find it somewhere else and form connections with people, and that ends up being really productive, possibly even across projects, across companies, like continuing relationships like that. And so there's a question to me about like actual structured mentorship programs versus like creating opportunities for people to find mentors and encouraging people to make informal mentorship relationships with other people. Because I think especially as we get further along, that ends up being like a really important skill to have, and where a lot of the like high quality mentorship happens.
I heard of a really interesting program that was happening at Popple, or one of the programming languages conferences, where they got an NSF grants to pay graduate students to learn what it's like. And I really liked that program because it was, you're an early career academic. What is a conference? I feel like that's like just such a valuable thing. Nobody's there holding your hand, bringing you to that thing. And I wonder what kind of opportunities there are to build these informal relationships, because oftentimes those are the ones. It's not the, we're pairing you up with the most senior person at the company, but it's like, hey, we vibed over lunch. You were wearing a Steven Universe shirt, and I thought that was cool. Maybe we can have a conversation.
From my personal experience, I've found that to be some of the most valuable collaboration. Like in my work, I go to many conferences a year. I'm at conferences more than I'm at home usually. And so my social community, in addition to my work community, is the free and open source software community worldwide. And it's like all of the best like innovation that we've done to the project since I've been involved has been like as a result of talking to people, explaining the project to them, finding new use cases through explaining it to them. Like, so they're like, oh, it's for this thing. And it's like, oh, well, I hadn't thought of that before. That kind of stuff. And like, so I think that collaborative mentorship kind of thing, like creating an environment of community mentorship versus like traditional top-down like hierarchy kind of thing where you're assigned a person. I think it gives you more intellectual freedom.
I've been kind of ruminating on this concept of software apprenticeships. That was something that was available to me when I was going to high school. I could either go college track or I could go VOTech. I ended up going vocational technical at the time. And to me, that feels like something that's just missing. So a lot of the people who need mentorship probably aren't on the college track. And the other thing that I saw with a lot of the mentorship conversations I was having was very tool-based. They need to know Git, they need to know Postgres, they need to know whatever. And I was reflecting on the apprenticeship is, the tools don't matter nearly as much as watching someone complete a project and understanding what it takes to do the thing. And I know that we're the free software folks, so we always are going to push that. But for the mentee, the value is probably trying to get a job. And so if that's the case, I would say, I don't know how this would work. In my brain, I was like, I just want to attach people to a mentor and like have them just work with them for a period of time, so that they just see how the work happens, and how that one person gets their job done. I think through osmosis, you learn a lot through that process. I don't know how that translates to mentorship programs, but yeah, that's where my head has been.
That's valuable. We can do one more, and then I'd like to reserve a little bit of time at the end.
Yeah, I love the word apprenticeship. My partner works in the trades, and so apprenticeship is like something that is just very normalized, that you're expected to go onto the job site. You're not going to know what you're doing, and you're going to bring the wrong tool 5 times, and that's just fine. I think it's really important to create maybe sandboxes, where that's really important. And I would also just say, like, someone came from non-traditional backgrounds, like in tech, at the age of like 25, right? Never touched code, never touched design, didn't know anything about it. It's going to be really overwhelming. Just like the ecosystem of like, what is Git and what is JavaScript compared to like TypeScript and React and what is, right? All these things. And like the more we can like lower that cognitive barrier to entry, we can like manage it well. I'm here to everything myself, and so it's just like I want to understand everything so deeply, but just getting paralyzed by decisions and like. So having spaces that where some of this is like kind of pre-decided, or that you can like help people understand the place of the ecosystem. And then the last thing is just like I like love the idea of the apprenticeship. I would also say like a design apprenticeship. Like I think these skills of like design thinking and like systems thinking are so critical now, especially like AI is automating things and blah blah blah. But like just helping. For me personally, I realized like I've only been running design systems. So my brain works, but it's how me like it's kind of just piece and like recognize what their power as designers and that they have. It's not just purely like what their output is in terms of like code and how they, but like all the ways they contribute, like decision making, like how data plays into like UX and how UX plays into like development and like why that's something I'm very passionate about. Like clarifying for myself and the team that I work on, but then also I think if like people that are in the space that like understand like what these pipelines look like, how products are made, and why decisions are made. So it's not just purely like helping them wrap their brains around like the technical processes. That's other things as well. How do they understand like data in more abstract ways? So it's something I think.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And people heard me gush about the OSL earlier, but like one of the great things about being there was being there for a long time. Being there for years is you saw projects come in. Thank you. You saw projects come in, and so it wasn't you got training on one specific tool for one specific project. You saw how that plays into management of a whole foundation's architecture. You saw that all of the connections that it had. And I think I heard that kind of comment a little bit of like, tools are great, but also it's longevity. It's how do you get a job? How do you do that? So thanks everybody for contributing. I really appreciated that. There's more to chew on than I wanted because now I have more things to think about. So thank you. And
Can I ask a question?
I think maybe.
So at the end of this, maybe people should put their networking information on this Etherpad.
Taking the words out of my mouth.
And perhaps if you're open to it because you're the organizer of this discussion, of course, maybe we could do this again next year. And like, if we're all going to, if any of us are going to be here at the next event, then we can come back and we can follow up and see how the ideas that we built as a community in this room today can like carry forward.
Yeah, exactly. I've scrolled down so that the email addresses won't be on the recording. But if you grab actually, does the QR code work when it's scrunched like that? I didn't think about that. Oh, cool. If people want to leave their contact information, I'd love to make a mailing list or just send people to follow up. We're also going to check in with the Outreachy Open Mentorship Handbook project. There'll be more information like published soon. Would love to follow up. Please feel free to grab me if you want to talk about anything in the hallways. I think I heard so many good ideas about sort of like the specifics about mentoring. And so I'd encourage everybody to think a little bit more systematically, like one level above of like, when we're designing these programs, what do we want them to look like? What is the scaffolding we need so that we can achieve all of the tactics that we talked about, so that we can organizationally build the support that we need, so that we can make these mentorship programs happen. Just a shout out, the apprenticeship idea is so great. I think that we are missing so many people that are not in universities. We're already seeing a decline of people getting CS jobs for various reasons, but we're leaving people out. And so I'd love to see thoughts from everybody who's sort of in the margins about how they can get involved and what they'd like to see out of these programs. So thank you very much. It looks like Savvy's got one more thing.
Encourage your mentees to post their work in their, like their links to their Git or wherever they post their self projects. in their in their resumes. I think that the more we normalize that, the more that we can move away from being so restrictive about intellectual, about who has a degree and who doesn't.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Eric?
Yeah, the discussion on apprenticeship, and I just came a little late, but just want to mention that the company I work for, Software for Good, has been effective at getting a grant from Ramsey County, which is in St. Paul, Minnesota, to pay student or young people who otherwise would not have time to go to a boot camp and learn engineering for about 12 months. So I don't know if I think some of that money had been federal, but there's definitely, if you frame it the right way, there may be local governments who might see this as a way to, particularly for marginalized youth, and to address these things.
Cool. Yeah, really appreciate that. I encourage everybody to look for, I think the local funding is a great idea, especially also just connecting with people in your community. I don't know about you, but I'm a little sick of being on a laptop all the time. So being able to meet people in my community that are working on similar things. I was able to just learn about the Open Eugene stuff. And so I'm really excited that that's starting back up. So thanks everybody. Feel free to grab me. If you want to be included in further conversations, feel free to drop your email address in the pad, and I'll follow up with everybody later today or by the end of the conference. So thank you very much.